Matt, thank you so much for being here, and we're really excited to talk about the Alliance for Water Stewardship. But I think to kick us off, we really need to just have a level set. What is AWS, Alliance for Water Stewardship? What's the standard? And why did WWF, TNC, Pacific Institute, and other companies come together to create it?
Sure, yeah. So show of hands, who's heard of the Alliance for Water Stewardship? That's going to help me out. Well, good.
Fantastic.
So the Alliance for Water Stewardship was formed actually about 10 years ago, and it was formed by really a very diverse group of water users, advocates, NGOs, to really help companies that had significant water risk in their direct operations and their supply chain to develop a coherent approach to address that risk. But not just to focus on internal process optimization and water use within the four walls and the fence line, but to really get those companies working with stakeholders, diverse stakeholders throughout the supply chain in a collaborative manner to address a lot of the water risk that really exists outside the fence line.
Right, great. And what are some of the unique features of the standard?
Yeah, it's great. I think one of the things that we've heard this morning is how highly hyper-local water-related issues are, right?
Exactly.
From basin to basin, watershed to watershed, municipality to municipality, water risk and water issues are different. So, one of the key features of the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard is that it's flexible. And so it can be used in a water-scarce environment, where water quality is an issue, where regulatory risk is a significant issue. So flexibility was built into the standard. And the standard is really a process. And it helps companies work through a process of identifying how they're using water, where they're getting it from, and then based on that, in consultation with their stakeholders, developing a water stewardship plan for the site to really address those risks. But just as importantly, and this is the other unique feature, is to really do some collaborative actions outside the four walls with their stakeholders to address those shared opportunities and challenges that really emanate from stresses that are occurring with our water resources.
Exactly. I think that's one of the most exciting and interesting and powerful things about AWS. And the unique feature you mentioned right there about multi-stakeholder collaboration outside of the four walls of an operations. Can you share an example, or how is this actually done, right? How does AWS enable this? And how does it help businesses?
Great question. So I'm based in Milwaukee, so eventually my conversation has to get to beer, cheese, or the Packers. So come on, people, that's my only joke. That's it. All right, so we're going to talk about beer. Miller Coors, so their flagship brewery is located in Milwaukee. They've been there about 150 some odd years. They're good corporate citizens. They're well known for their activities out in the community. They obviously use a lot of water, and they have a lot of water stress that's associated, with the brewing process and obviously the supply chain. One of the things that AWS helped them do, in addition to really put a more comprehensive management system approach in terms of dealing with quality issues as it related to the water source, it helped them connect their community efforts that they were doing with the community in Milwaukee with those quality efforts that are associated with stormwater runoff, polluted agricultural runoff that's getting into the tributaries and into Lake Michigan. And so it really just helped them be more intentional about those collaborative efforts, again, outside the facility, and really being more strategic in terms of those stakeholders that they're working with. And so, again, they were able to tie those collaborative efforts with those stakeholders back to a business risk.
Right.
So, you kind of, it's a double win for them.
Give them that framework to do that. So I think that's really helped in terms of understanding what AWS does and how it can help businesses kind of implementing water stewardship practices. And I want to just switch it a little bit and think about, and specifically, we commissioned some research this summer, really, and what we learned was that Americans want to see businesses contribute more to these water issues. And in particular, one of the things that kind of went to the top of what they would do was adoption of a third-party standard around water stewardship. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on why is AWS relevant, or how does it provide value to businesses and consumers, and some best practices based on kind of your experience so far?
Yeah, so there's a lot of ground to cover in that question, but I kind of want to go back to the genesis of the Alliance for Water Stewardship and the group of organizations that were really involved in the creation of the Alliance. And a couple of our underwriters here at WWF, obviously Nestlé Waters and the Nature Conservancy, the Pacific Institute, General Mills, some other companies. It was a really unique combination of the private sector, NGO groups, or even some government groups and some economic development groups out of Europe that were highly involved in the development of the standard. So one of the values, for businesses participating with AWS and implementing this standard is it enjoys this credibility, this wide credibility and buy-in from all these different groups that are involved in water stewardship issues, right? So it wasn't just created by a single company for a single purpose or a single issue in a single country. It really had this broad view that we need to do something, develop a more coherent approach around water stewardship. So that's one of the business values. Now, obviously, again, since water is so hyper-local and businesses use water in different ways, businesses are going to get a different value depending on where they're located and depending on what they're producing from the Alliance for Water Stewardship. So I think it is good to reinforce the fact that it's not just a standard for sites and companies that are in water-scarce regions. It's equally useful in the Great Lakes as it is in California, as it is in Arizona, as it is anywhere in North America or globally, because it is a global standard. So just in terms of some of the best practices that we're really seeing out there, I think one of the leave behind or takeaway messages for the audience and people who are following along online and otherwise is that we have a lot of work to do, and I mean we, the collective, we have a lot of work to do to really educate consumers and other businesses and other groups that aren't really thinking about water, how water impacts us every day, right? Not many of us woke up this morning here in the New York area and were surprised when we turned on the tap water and water came out. Probably none of us were surprised that we had hot showers last night or this morning. That's a miracle of modern science that we really don't think too often about what's coming out of the tap. And so one of the things that AWS really seeks to do in partnership is really just begin educating people that we're surrounded by water stress. We've heard about climate change and the importance of resiliency with the waterfront here in New York. I'll take it back to the Great Lakes again. Major water quality related issues in the Great Lakes, and you get just outside the basin, in the Mississippi Basin, major issues with scarcity and replenishment of aquifers. So again, I think it's really important that we just kind of take this back home, whether it's to our communities, whether it's to our businesses, whether it's to our residences, and just understand where we're sourcing water from, how much we're paying for it, how we're using it, and then what are sort of the risks and the issues that are associated with that.
Sure.
But really one of the unique things about AWS and addressing freshwater issues is we have to do it together. And so there are a lot of opportunities out there around addressing our freshwater resources. And AWS is really pushing companies to work in that collaborative manner. And so to get to your question on best practices, there's a really great group in California that of course, Nestlé Waters is involved in called the California Water Action Collaborative. And it's made up of a number of food and beverage companies, other companies, NGO groups that are local to California, but some national groups like WWF and the Nature Conservancy. And what this group does in California is they identify freshwater issues and challenges that are impacting the operations of these businesses, but are also impacting, obviously, the habitat and the freshwater resources of California. And then they agree as a group to work together in sort of a pre-competitive manner to address those issues, to address those freshwater challenges, thereby doing what, right? Creating value for the entire community. And I'll end my question by going back to beer. One of the things that Miller Coors says is no water, no beer. And no water, no New York City, right? I mean, it's that existential.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. That had multiple layers to it, and I think one of them was the call to action, right? And I just would love to just maybe hear from another perspective if there's another thing on the call to action. But we have a very diverse group here in the audience. So, is there anything else that you'd like to add in terms of what would you say is the call to action related to AWS or any of the best practices, something you've seen that's worked really well in terms of a collaborative effort?
Yeah, I mean, again, we just can't take for granted the fact that we have water and that we expect to have it whenever we need it here in North America. And so again, we just have to get out of this mindset that it's always going to be here, it's always going to be cheap and and readily available. And all of us can do something. Again, whether it's in an official capacity with where we work or where we live, we can get involved. And so I guess it's the same call to action. Get involved and just understand what the water challenges and stresses are that are related to your situation where you live, where you work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Valeria.
Thanks very much, yeah.